Brian Barnett is just a regular guy. He's not a doctor. He has no legal license in any field of mental or emotional health. Brian Barnett merely shares the insights he's gained from his personal experiences for anybody who may choose to use such information as he or she personally chooses, while accepting full responsibility for his or her own individual thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and actions. Brian Barnett assumes no responsibility whatsoever for anybody's individual choice to expose himself or herself to any information that Brian Barnett shares, and by listening to this program, you're acknowledging that you, and only you, are responsible for your own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to The Last Symptom. I'm Brian Barnett, the creator and host of The Last Symptom. Thank you for joining me this week. We're fixing to get into a discussion here today about a variety of different topics, but I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself to y'all first, since I haven't done it for a while, and some of you might be brand new listeners. Those of you who've been listening to me for a few years probably rolling your eyes saying, oh my gosh, he's not going to tell his life story again, is he? Well, I got to, because there might be some new listeners. So I appreciate you hanging in there while I do this for those who might be listening for the very first time. I personally live with borderline personality disorder. Some folks are calling it emotionally unstable personality disorder these days. But I lived with BPD myself for at least the first 35 years of my life, completely unaware that I had it. Then I suffered a major life crisis, which gave me really no other choice but to begin seriously looking inward. And that's when I realized that not only was I unhealthy, but more specifically, that I had a nameable disorder. That was really shocking to me to discover that I had lived all my life with this nameable disorder, completely unaware. Fortunately for me, I had never heard of things like borderline personality disorder before. I hadn't heard of it in pop culture. If I had, it just went right over my head. And I'd never heard it taught. I'd never entertained interest in learning or studying about psychology or emotional health or anything like that. So when my eyes were open to the fact that I was living with this thing called borderline personality disorder, and that I had always lived with it, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, I'm going to figure out the fundamental causes of this thing, and I'm just going to rid myself of it once and for all. And I was successful at this. It took me about 7 years of seriously analyzing emotional disorders in general, and the specifics related to my life, my family life growing up, my relationships, those sorts of things. But in time, I did successfully rid myself completely of borderline personality disorder, and I've been living for quite some time now perfectly healthy, emotionally speaking, authentically free of any emotional disorders. Why do I say that I was fortunate for never having heard of things like borderline personality disorder before? The reason I was fortunate is that the vast majority of all the quote-unquote experts on borderline personality disorder tell you that things like borderline personality disorder and borderline personality disorder itself are incurable. That there is much a part of you as the color of your eyes. Literally, this is what the quote-unquote experts teach people. They tell you that it is interwoven into your genetic makeup. So since it's part of what you inescapably are, the best you should strive for is to learn to live with these disorders for the rest of your life, and just commit some coping techniques to rote memory. Do you know what rote memory is? That's when you repeat a thing so many times that it sort of becomes like a reflex. I used rote memory learning quite a bit when I was learning Spanish in my 20s. The way I'd do it is I'd put 30 Spanish words on an index card. 30 would fit on a 3x5 index card. So I'd write 30 Spanish words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I'd flip the card over, and then I would correspond the Spanish on the one side with the English equivalents words on the other side. And then I would lie in my bed, or throughout the day while I was working, I'd carry them in my shirt pocket, get those cards out, and I'd start practicing. And the way I did it was, so let's say that number 1 is tree. Then in my memory, I'm trying to recall what tree is in Spanish. And then number 2, car. What is car in Spanish? Number 3, dog. What is dog in Spanish? And so forth. And I would, as I was going through these flashcards, if I so much as hesitated for a split second on a single word, let's say that so like I said, I could fit 30 on one card. Let's say I get to 25, and it takes me just a split second to recall the word in the other language, then I would start all over from the beginning again. If just the hesitation was a failure, in my opinion. So I would have to start the index card right back at the very beginning again. So that was the goal, to run through those cards as quickly as I could, seeing if I could pull into my memory the equivalent word in the other language, and if a hesitation was a failure, so I'd have to start from the very beginning again. And for a certain period of time, I was learning 100 brand new words a day this way. But anyway, that's rote memory. It's like if you tell a story so many times for so many years, you tell the same story. When you go to tell the story, somebody, let's say, asks you about, hey, tell me about that time you saw Bigfoot. And you've already told this story 19 million times over the course of 10 years. Rote memory allows you to tell the story without accessing memory. So you're not pulling the story from memory. It's just like reflex. You're just recalling it from repetition. The problem with this, when it comes to emotional disorders, is that this type of approach does nothing whatsoever to address the underlying causes of why a person is unhealthy to begin with. This type of thinking, where you just you don't get to the root of the problem, you just look at the symptoms as if they're the problem. That's the attitude that it reflects, that the symptoms are really the problem. Forget about what's causing the symptoms. The symptoms are the thing that we need to be concerned about. That's the problem. And then as a result, it leaves people still suffering with the underlying causes. So let's say that you can constrain yourself from manifesting any of the symptoms of this emotional disorder, whatever emotional disorder we might be talking about. Let's say that you can constrain yourself from exhibiting those symptoms, but you haven't addressed the underlying problem. It's still there. It's still making you unhealthy and miserable, and it's going to come out in other ways. I think about a person who plugs a dam with their finger, and then the rest of the dam starts to give away because you've plugged the one escape that the tremendous pressure behind that dam had to escape. You plug that up, the pressure hasn't gone anywhere. So it's still there, and that's the way people are too. And that's the problem with the professional community focusing on symptoms. In fact, I'd be curious to know how many of you folks out there listening have visited a therapist, probably at the pleading of a partner, only for the therapist to give you a few coping tricks, then send you on your way and tell you that there's no need for you to keep seeing him or her. Has that ever happened to you? Ladies, have you sent your beaux out there, and has that happened to them? Did they come back and say the therapist says, I don't need to come back, and yet you still see all of the same issues that you saw before he went to the therapist? And fellers, has that happened to you? Pleaded with a partner to go to a therapist. They go to the therapist, and after 5 visits, they come back and say, the therapist says, I'm fine. I don't need to go back. Maybe your therapist has even said that there's nothing abnormal about you and has led you to believe that everything you're dealing with is just normal human behavior. Well, these sorts of therapists, and they make up the majority, I'm sorry to say, don't deserve the clothes on their backs. They really don't, because they're not earning their living. What they're doing is they're defrauding people for a living. And it really demonstrates their complete and utter lack of genuine understanding and insight about what emotional health is, what emotional disorders are, and what sets them apart from what is just normal everyday issues involving the human condition. So imagine that. The entire reason that their jobs exist at all, and they can't even live up to the fundamentals of it. And like I say, it's unfortunate that I have to say that they make that type of therapist makes up the majority, but they do. There are some great therapists out there, but you really have got to search for them. So because I was never exposed early on to these lies about borderline personality disorder being incurable, and the lies that my emotional disorder is an inseparable part of me, I didn't start out working with these completely false premises. This reminds me of a famous study that was done on school-age children. So that what they did was they took mediocre students in grade school, I think, and they started telling them that they were gifted. Wow, you're gifted. Your IQ is off the charts. And every interaction that they had with these kids was of the same nature as the interactions that they would have with truly gifted students. So, guess what happened? All of the mediocre students' grades shot up drastically for real. Just by the teachers, these figures of authority, telling them that they were really smart, mediocre students began demonstrating really high levels of intelligence for real. Does that work the other way around too? Yes, it does. Think about poor communities and abusive homes where children are raised being led to believe that their options are limited to a really small, narrow assortment of choices. In the vast majority of cases, it doesn't even occur to these children, even as they grow older, that there is no limit there. Their limit is imaginary. That they're constraining themselves to those limits, but the limits aren't real. It doesn't even occur to most of these children to aim higher. So people born in certain conditions, in most cases, they just remain in those conditions because they've come from families and from environments and neighborhoods where everybody says you can't be anything greater than this, and so then they don't aim for anything higher than that. Sure, you've heard of the elephant illustration. You've seen a meme of it or something, or heard of it somewhere along the way. But it's where these giant circus elephants can be restrained by just a single little cord. They just wrap a tiny little cord around their ankle, put it in stick a post in the ground, and it keeps the giant, massive elephant there in place. Why? Because when they were baby elephants, they were restrained by that same rope, which at the time they couldn't break. So now, as adults, it don't even occur to them that they can just snap that rope without any effort whatsoever. It never even occurs to them to try. So thank goodness that early on in my authentic recovery from borderline personality disorder, I had not been indoctrinated by the professional community or by popular culture to view borderline personality disorder as something that was incurable. Because there's a very good chance that if I had been indoctrinated that way, that this thinking is what I would have limited myself to. My dogs keep snoring and distracting me, and I'm pretty sure my microphone would be picking up that snoring, so I keep having to stop and wake them up and restart what I'm doing here. So as it happened, I did my work over 7 years on the premise that borderline personality disorder was something that could be understood and resolved completely. And that's exactly what the truth proved to be. And you know, I still get messages from angry people. This is true. I still get messages from people who are furious at me for saying that borderline personality disorder is completely curable. I got my dog, I had to put my dogs up because they were snoring and I could not concentrate. So here we are again. And earlier on, it was my birds singing and everything. And goodness gracious. I'll tell you what, since I've been recording video for these shows, it's gotten a lot more complex, I guess. It's just more to think about instead of just sitting down and doing it. Got to think about the presentation. Anywho, so the elephant. We used that, we talked about that. Yeah, that's what happened. And, yeah. So early on when I started when I set out to rid myself of borderline personality disorder, I wasn't working on that premise. Oh, well, all the brainiacs out there, all the quote-unquote experts say that you're going to have to live with it for the rest of your life. I didn't know it. So I didn't have that imaginary rope around my ankle holding me in place. And that's really what that is. That's really what that is. That's really the injustice that's going on between the professional community and the world of people suffering out there with emotional disorders. That's another thing, you know. They will have you believe that it's a mental illness. And even people who've been following me for years, I can't break them of that. It's not a mental illness. A mental illness is when your brain is malfunctioning. It's not a mental health issue. It's an emotional health issue. And you know, it's frustrating for me to have been doing this now for, what are we in, the 4th season. People have been following me from the very beginning, and I love them to death, but they're not listening, or they're not learning, if they're still saying things like mental health and mental illness in regards to what are just emotional disorders. So let's see. Yes. So I think I was saying before we were so rudely interrupted that I still get messages from angry people all the time who have an emotional disorder like borderline personality disorder, and they're angry at me. Do you know what they tell me? They angrily tell me that I'm lying to them and that borderline personality disorder is incurable. And they parrot all the lies from the professional community. These folks who are living with their emotional disorder, they've never been free of it. They're living with the disorder, so they're emotionally unhealthy, come to me, a person who once had the same thing that they're dealing with, and now who really doesn't have it. They come to me angry that I'm trying to break them free of that mental prison of believing that their emotional disorder is curable. That's what I'm trying to help them see, and they rebel against that and fight against that. The same people who the professional community has only lied to and kept them imprisoned to their disorders, they will angrily jump to the defense of these same people, this same community of people who has never helped them at all in any genuine way. And of course, they'll come out with, they all say the same things. One of the same things that they all say is that, oh, how dare you? How dare you criticize these people who went to school for so many years and they've been studying this, this field of study has been around for 100 years and more, and here you are thinking that you know better. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I do know better. What you're not taking into consideration is that I myself had the disorder. I spent 7 years understanding it inside and out from personal, first-hand experience and from personal necessity. Now I really don't have it, and I'm able to look back and examine it now on the other side of it. If you think that going to a university for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, or I don't know how long a psychology degree is worth, how much time investments involved with that, but it still doesn't compare to my education on the matter, from having personally dealt with it, from having personally studied it for 7 years. That's a doctorate right there. And so you're really not thinking the thing through when you come at me with that argument. Because I don't have a degree, the work that I've done, my personal experiences on the matter, don't have any value. They don't have as much value as somebody who learned it from third-hand sources or fourth-hand sources. You're out of your mind. It's superior. What I have to offer you is superior to what many of them, especially the professional community as a group, is offering you. So that argument doesn't work. But they get very angry and they come at me with those types of arguments. Why do they do this? Why would a person get so upset and angry and jump to the defense of people who have not helped them? Why would they do this? Where is this emotion coming from? Well, for one, if I really had such a severe emotional disorder and I truly escaped it, what would they imagine that this says about them that they've yet to accomplish the same thing? From their perspectives, wouldn't this feed into the shame and the feelings of being inherently broken that they already live with? Also, a belief in the lie that their emotional disorders are incurable make for a handy excuse, don't they? Yeah, a real handy excuse not to make any real efforts to do the work necessary to change the attitudes and the beliefs that they live with, or to eventually give up certain behaviors. They enjoy being unhealthy too much. Another reason, which is the most disappointing of all for me, is that most of the people I come across with emotional disorders actually celebrate being unhealthy. Yes, that's true. They wear their disorders like a badge of honor that they're proud of and they outright brag about. This is true. You're going to see this from now on, now that I brought it to your attention. When you go around Facebook, you go around Instagram, you see these people talking about their disorders, but not in a way to help anybody escape it or to offer any insight about underlying causes and how to fix those underlying causes. You don't see none of that. What you see instead, most of these are unhealthy women trying to work up some kind of internet fame by posting about their emotional disorders in bragging, sympathetic, proud ways, or to generate sympathy and attention. They view the disorders as being an inseparable part of themselves. Now, I wonder where they learned that from. Why did they learn to view their disorder as inseparable from them? But regardless, they do. And so their entire identities are wrapped up in the fact that they have borderline personality disorder. In fact, they will call themselves, I'm ABPD. In other words, I'm a borderline personality disorder. Not that I have borderline personality disorder, but that's what I am. And these are the attitudes that they live with. And then they celebrate and make memes and posts celebrating this disgustingly unhealthy disorder. It's gross. Tired identities and celebrating and bragging about having this disorder, which is just repugnant, and that anybody with any insight whatsoever knows is only a negative, and that should only be a person should only be interested in ridding themselves of things like that. So anyway, I really did have borderline personality disorder. It controlled every aspect of my life through childhood, through my adolescence, and my early adult years, and now I really don't have any emotional disorders. I ain't perfect. I'm still a human being. But I am somebody who distinctly understands the difference between what is emotional health issues, what is emotional disorder, and what is simply the human condition. And I truly did escape emotional disorder for real, borderline personality disorder. The more episodes of this show that you watch or you listen to, and the more of my work you consume, if you're an emotionally honest person, if you're an intellectually honest person, the truth of this will become self-evident. So there's no need for me to go to great pains to prove it to you here today, right here and now. I've put in my work to demonstrate that I do know what I'm talking about, and that I'm somebody that you can trust and that you can look to help educate you on these things. But you'll also have to put in your share of the work, and that means taking advantage of the resources that I've already made available. I'm one of the few personalities out there that you will ever find who does not tolerate any positive talk about emotional disorders. It's like somebody bragging about a tumor, a cancerous tumor. Why would you be proud of that? You want to get rid of it. You want to be rid of it. It's nothing to wax poetic about. It's something that's not supposed to be there, and it needs to be excised. And that's the truth also with emotional disorders. I also don't tolerate the types of thinking that says it's okay to just accept our emotional disorders as being part of us, or making it, embracing it as a normal part of our lives. I don't tolerate that. My own recovery did not fly straight as an arrow. In the 7 years that I was working on myself, it kind of took a side-goggling path, but I had a real end goal in view, and I achieved it. And I want and expect the same from people, for people who come to me. So that's the attitude that I want to cultivate in you, a positive, determined, resolute attitude, one that rejects the idea that these emotional disorders are anything fluffy and anything to be proud about. No, they're not. They're ruining your life. And if you don't know that, it's only because you've never known anything different. So, something to think about. We got some announcements. The Last Symptom website, thelastsymptom.com. I have both free and paid services over there, as well as the opportunity for you to donate to support my work if you'd like to do that. The paid services, one-on-one phone calls with me and one-on-one Zoom video calls with me. And also, I have developed and made available a 2-week intensive course. It's pre-recorded. Works with your schedule no matter what your schedule is. It's divided into 3-hour days. So, like 3 chapters a day for going into 2 weeks. Doesn't mean you have to do all 3 hours of the program every day. It just means that that's the way it's divided up. You can do 1 hour of the program a day, and then of course that would spread the course out over probably 3-4 weeks. But it is intensive, it is comprehensive, it's better than things like DBT. You can find that over at thelastsymptom.com. Would you like to join our online community? It's thriving. We would love to have you join us. The way you do that is by going to thelastsymptom.locals.com, or you can download the locals.com app and search for The Last Symptom by Brian Barnett. Orange Slices are condensed video highlights of this show in brief 5 to 10 minute lengths, and they appear on Rumble, YouTube, and Locals. This show now is available in video format. It's something that I started regularly this season. And you can subscribe to The Last Symptom by Brian Barnett channel on Rumble or on YouTube and watch this as videos. The Orange Slice videos, which are those condensed video highlights, are available on Rumble, YouTube, and Locals, Locals being our online community. I had an old buddy come visit me yesterday, just dropped in on me, and I was telling folks in my community there on Locals that this is something that's very common in Appalachia, where I'm from and where I'm at currently, where the people you know just drop in on you and unannounced. And this was something that I did not experience in all my years in Philadelphia, nor in the Boston area. In fact, out there, culturally, that's a big no-no. It's considered rude to do that, but in Appalachia, it's not. And so I had this buddy drop by. His name's Rocky. And I was sharing some audio that I had recorded of just us sitting around and jawing and chewing the fat. But it reminded me of a story involving poison ivy. I'm immune to poison ivy. And growing up, everybody I knew in my family was immune to poison ivy. My brother, my sister, my dad. I don't know about my mom. But, we grew up way out in the woods, and poison ivy was everywhere. And it was never a problem for us. We were totally immune to it. We could take it in our hands and everything. The vines, the leaves themselves, wad those leaves up, crush them in our hands, nothing. So I grew up thinking, and I really believe this, believing that being allergic to poison ivy was all in a person's head. I truly believed that, and I believed it up until just a few years ago. In fact, have kids from the city come to visit, and we'd be out in the woods. They'd be saying, "Is that poison ivy? Is that poison ivy?" Because they're freaking out, worried about brushing up against some poison ivy. And even if they were brushing through poison ivy, we'd tell them, no, it's no poison ivy. Because I was just convinced that it's all in your brain, and I'm not going to entertain it. I'm not going to play into that. Well, when my daughter was, I think, 3, she was 3, I was renting this place that had, every summer, poison ivy would grow up along the side of this house. And so one day I had her out there with me, and I was tearing that poison ivy down with my bare hands, tearing down all the vines and making a big pile of them. And just the dust. She did not come into contact with any poison ivy, or the vines, or the leaves, or nothing. But just the dust coming off those vines. So as I'm ripping them down, the dust is in the air. Just the dust made her break out terribly with poison ivy. And that, because she was only 3, I knew that she had not had time to become indoctrinated into believing, to even knowing what poison ivy is, let alone believing that it can affect you that way. So that was my first real life proof that people having reactions to poison ivy is an honest to God real thing. Before that, I did not believe it. I did not believe it because, like I say, I had never seen anybody break out from it, and everybody in my family could handle the stuff no problem. But that was proof positive for me. Anyway, the story don't end there. One night Rocky says, "Hey, how about if I bring over some hot dogs and we have a fire tonight?" And Rocky, I'll tell you who he looks like. He looks like Popcorn Sutton, a famous moonshiner. Looks exactly like him. Looks like him, talks like him, dresses like him. Big old long gray beard, older feller. I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." So it got dark. He come over with the hot dogs, and I had a fire going there, we started cooking the hot dogs over the fire. Rocky ate, just putting the hot dog on a stick and cooking it over the open fire. And then Rocky had a hot dog, and then a little bit of time passed. He stuck another hot dog on a stick, cooked that over the fire, started eating that. And then he started coughing. He says, "What do you got on that fire?" I said, "Why?" He says, "Whatever you got in that fire, it's choking me up." And it turned out that it was those poison ivy vines. I'd thrown a bunch of those vines into the fire, and here Rocky had cooked his wiener hot dog over top the campfire, and the poison ivy was affecting him. Oh man, I laughed so hard about that, because literally only like the day before had seen for the very first time poison ivy affect somebody, and here he was cooking his wieners over the poison ivy, and it was affecting him. I felt so bad, but I'm telling you, that's just how much out of my mind it was that was a real thing. That even after I saw it affect my daughter, I went right back to thinking of it as, nothing that will affect anybody, because it doesn't affect me. And there's so many lessons from that I've just been hanging on to that and thinking about all the ways that could be applied. But I've told you, I think, that back before my big major life crisis, I looked at psychology as just being quack stuff and just being total fiction. And there I was, living my whole life living with something that only psychology can explain, and that only an interest and a digging into psychology could fix. But as far as I was concerned, psychology was just a bunch of nothing. It was just a big fictional joke. So two instances in my life where I learned a real important lesson about you can be so certain of a thing and be proved completely ignorant in the very next instant, and it makes you completely change your thinking on that thing. Happened with psychology, happened with poison ivy. There was a dog that climbed up under our house when I was growing up. I've told you in the past that we'd have these dogs, these strays, that people would just drop them off out in the woods, out in the back roads in the country. And we got a lot of our dogs that way. And so there was this old dog, climbed up underneath our house, had a litter of puppies up underneath there. Real ugly dog. My dad was talking about it at breakfast one morning. He said, "Now, you guys hear any of those noises underneath the house?" And I said, "No, what noises?" He says, "Sounds like a bunch of puppies. So what I think is that a stray got up underneath the house, had a bunch of puppies. Now, I don't want you going up underneath the house. I don't want you going in there, because it's a real small space, and that dog decides to go after you. You got nowhere to go. It's real dangerous." I think I was 11 or 12 years old at the time. And I said, "Okay." But days passed, and I started thinking about those dogs. And I started hearing them too myself up underneath there. And, I love dogs. So I made up my mind that I was going to go up underneath the house and see what I could do for that mama dog and her puppies. And I knew it was dangerous. And so I knew that there was a risk, and I knew I had to be real careful. First time I got up underneath the house there to check on those pups, old mama dog, she started growling, serious like saying, don't you come no closer. And I was about, from here where I'm sitting to how to let you folks who are just listening get an idea how far away it was. I'm going to guess 20 yards away, something like that. It was a pretty good distance. And I couldn't see her. I could only hear her growling at me from about that distance away. And so I just stopped right there in the dark. I had no flashlight or anything. There were some cracks where some sunlight was spilling in, just these little tiny cracks in the foundation where the light was coming in from outside. And after a while my eyes would adjust and I could see silhouettes there underneath the house. But I sat there real calm, not moving, not making any quick moves at all, not knowing how big this dog is, but hearing the pups. I can hear the pups whining and stuff, hear her moving around a little bit. And I started talking to her real soft. Hey there, Mama. Hey there, Mama. I'm not here to hurt you. I ain't here to hurt you, Mama. You're okay. You're okay. Did that. I think I stayed underneath there for about an hour that day. And I went back the next day and did the same thing. She started growling at me. I stopped there. I'm on my hands and knees. I'm in a crawling position. There truly is no room to move around down there. Just the ground and just enough space for me to crawl on my belly. So I stopped there again. I talked to her. Hey, old Mama, it's all right. It's all right. I'm not here to hurt you. Nothing to worry about here. Again, I stayed about another hour and then I left. The next day, or maybe the next 3 or 4 days, something like that, she was starting to get used to my voice. And so I said, well, I'm going to try to crawl toward her. And so I crawled maybe 2 feet, and she started growling. I started talking to her again. Oh, good old Mama. I know you got your old pups up there, and you're just protecting your pups. You're a good old girl. Left, come back again. And then as this progressed, I would test my luck each day just a little bit more. I'd crawl just a little bit further than I had crawled the day before. And she'd let me get a little bit closer each time. This went on for, I'm not kidding, a whole month of me doing this. But I was so patient and no hurry whatsoever. I was working with the understanding that she had probably been abused. She was probably scared and all these things. And I just really took my time. And how exciting it was to go from such a distance, of interacting with her from such a distance at the beginning to the day where I was right up close to her. Now, she wouldn't let me touch the pups at that point. She wouldn't let me touch her, and I wouldn't try. But I'd just get right up close to her before she'd start growling. And every day she determined how close I could get. When she said that's far enough, that's where I stopped. And I would just stop and I would just talk to her. Hey, old Mama. Hey, old Mama. It's good to see you. How are the old pups doing there? You're such a good mom. Until the day that she let me pet her and she let me pet those old pups. And even beyond, she finally allowed me to carry those pups out from underneath the house. That was a big day. Those pups had never been out from underneath the house. Neither had Mama since she went underneath there and had that litter of pups. But even after I brought her pups out, she wouldn't come out. And my dad was astonished. He was just astonished that she had let me do that. And eventually I coaxed her out from underneath the house. But that took a lot more than actually her allowing me to bring her pups out, was to cook. Oh, that was another thing. When I'd go up underneath the house, I started taking like a bowl of milk and stuff like that for her, and food, and that certainly helped things along. But finally coaxed her out. We ended up keeping her, and like I said, she's an ugly old dog. Had been mistreated and abused clearly, but the kindness and the patience that I showed how that paid off in allowing me to develop this relationship with her. And I think about her often, that poor old mama dog. She lived with us for years until she just died of old age. And in fact, we kept one of the pups from that litter, another really ugly dog. I can't remember what the dog's name was. Ugly or something like that. Oh, it was a hideous looking dog. But you know how hideous things, when they're babies, sometimes the hideousness enhances the cuteness. Because you know what I mean? It's like the ugly duckling type thing. But those were such great dogs, and a lot of lessons in that story too, about how to deal with people, especially people who've been mistreated, and in physical ways, in emotional ways, spiritual ways, mental ways. The type of patience that is required. And where does that patience come from? It comes from empathy, right? Empathy, sympathy, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, trying to understand the things they're feeling and thinking and scared about. So sometimes life calls for that. You know, if you imagine I got up underneath that house and, hey, don't growl at me. Don't you growl at me. This is my house. Who do you think you are? How far you reckon that would have got me? But then, on the other hand, there are circumstances that call for that, right? And like I said at the beginning, I'm not perfect in my dealings with people, but I'm always trying to give a person what they need. Yeah, always trying to give a person what they need, what they truly need. Even if being harsh, or seeming harsh, I should say, is what they need. So there have been times where I've been harsh with people because they're entertaining too much pointless things that get them nowhere. It's just, I call it wallowing, wallowing in like self-pity and stuff like that. That's a thing that goes round and round and round, and generally the way I've learned to snap somebody out of that is with what seems like a little bit of harshness. Hey, come on now, what are you doing? Go splash some water on your face and let's get to work here. That's not getting you anywhere. We could get stuck on that for years, this kind of woe is me type thinking. But then on the other hand, when you see that a person is trying, they're not stuck in these type of woe is me type pointless thinking and stuff and wallowing. They're really trying, but they're failing. And then that's when the mama type treatment might be appropriate. It's okay. Talking more softly, being patient. It's okay. You'll get it. You didn't get it this time, but that's all right. And really the part where I was, the part in the story of Mama where she got to tell me how far I could go. That's an art, really, to learn how to deal with people that way, and to not assume things, but to be sensitive to the feedback that you're getting from them. I do it with my daughter a lot. Try to feel her out for what she's ready for, what she's not ready for, things like that. There will be times where I'm trying to teach my daughter something that to me seems very important and about the world or whatever, and I'll go into it thinking, wow, this is so important, she needs to hear this, but her mind's just not there, or her growth isn't quite there. She's thinking about video games, or she's thinking about this or that, and that's kind of like, listening to Mama growl and say, that's far enough right now. If I try to push it, she's not going to retain the information. She's not going to learn, and she's not going to enjoy it. But if I listen to the feedback I'm getting from her, if I'm sensitive to that, I can say to myself, okay, well, her ears aren't open at this moment in time, so she's not going to retain this. I could talk for 40 minutes, and all it's going to do is just bore her to death. So maybe I'll shelve this for a little bit. We'll come back to it another time. And you'd be surprised how I'll be sitting around totally absorbed in another thing myself when she will come up to me and say, hey, Dad, do you remember when you were talking about such and such thing? What did you mean about that? So it gets in there. So even though she's not fully engaged, it gets in there. And it's kind of like a seed. She'll come to me later on. Tell me more about that. And, maybe I wasn't feeling, enthusiastic about having that conversation. Maybe I'm totally tied up in something else. But when I see that the timing is right for her, and the thing is still important to discuss, and I see that now this is Mama, she's letting me crawl a little bit closer to her. That's a good time for me to say, well, okay, honey, I put my things aside, put all my last symptom work aside, even though I know that it's going to mean that I'm going to be recording this show until 1 o'clock in the morning instead of finishing at a reasonable time. But I look and say the time is right for her. So I put the stuff aside. I say, yeah, honey, I'd love to tell you more about that. So anyway, what I was saying was this and this and this. And that's what life is like, ain't it? It's having these experiences that are seemingly completely unrelated, but learning bigger things from them. Like the story here with Mama underneath the house. The story about the poison ivy and Rocky eating poison ivy hot dogs. So I had some other things. I wanted to read you a poem. I've been wanting to read you a poem here I'm not joking you, for 2 months now. I keep just pushing it back. One thing I will share with you before we call it a night is hats. Why did men stop wearing hats? Those of you who are watching me on Rumble or YouTube, I'll show you a picture here. This is a picture of a baseball game, I believe. And in the picture, there's this sea of people. It's a black and white picture. And every one of these people, every one of these guys are wearing a fedora or a newsboy ball cap. And the name of this article by Joe Scaglione from November 25th, 2021 is titled, Why Men Stopped Wearing Hats. Have you ever wondered that? He says the picture in the article was taken in 1923 outside of a soccer or football game. I'm sorry, so I'm a little biased toward baseball, but between West Ham United and the Bolton Wanderers. He says you'll notice that every man in the picture except for one is wearing a hat. And not a snapback or fitted lid with a sports team logo snapped on the front. I'm talking about a full-on Don Draper. Let's get down to business, go home and drink ourselves into oblivion kind of hat. We don't see that anymore, ever. So what happened to these hats? Back in 1912, men didn't leave the house without a hat, and boys always wore caps. There isn't one sole reason, the article says, but many factors contributed to the decline. And one of those factors was the automobile. The automobile put an end to hat wearing. It says the most popular reason is the car. Car roofs made it difficult to wear a hat and generally made hats useless. In the 1920s, less than 1% of the population owned a car. This figure rose to 25% in 1940 and 55% in 1970. Men still bought hats, but wore them less. I found this interesting. In the 1920s, people walked everywhere, rode horses, traveled in open carriages, I'm guessing, yeah. So they needed protection from the elements. But the invention of the automobile provided shelter over a person's head. So there you go. the car brought an end to people wearing hats. Many of you know that I'm a big fan of fedoras. It's a habit that I picked up from my old Cherokee Indian mentor, Dave Selvage, and I wear fedoras to this day. Typically, I wear them in the woods when I'm out on long excursions in the woods. Also, anytime I'm dressed up in formal dress, then I like to pair that with a nice fedora. So I have over the years, I've accumulated, I think I have 8 or 9 fedoras of varying degrees of quality. But my favorite hat is about 25 years old. It looks like I bought it yesterday. And the oldest hat that I've had since I was 13. And I've got pictures of myself wearing that hat, and it still fits my head today. Back when I was 13, I had to put some things on the inside around the inner band to make it fit my head. But I love that fedora, and I still own it today. And that's got some stories behind it that I'll tell you about one of these days. Ladies and gentlemen, do something nice for yourselves this weekend. I enjoyed talking to you. Some shows are easier for me to talk than others. It's that human condition thing that we're always talking about. Take care.